And it is 10 o'clock. Good evening. I'm Cordell Wright. Today was the final day of Siouxpercon at the convention center. Parker Brown was there, and he met with two artists with a special passion for inspiring young people. He brings us our top story tonight.
Fandom is an escape or an outlet to many. At Siouxpercon 2023, two artists helped share that outlet with the next generation.
Eric Gapster is a cartoonist whose works can be seen in DC Comics. He had ideas for a comic strip and eventually turned those ideas into a graphic novel series. He now travels and shares his work and hopes to inspire kids to read and learn.
I didn't meet a cartoonist until I was in college, so that would have been incredible to me as a young third, fourth grade. That would have been really inspiring, so it really means a lot to be able to give back and try and inspire the next generation of cartoonists and just share that love of comics.
Hector Curiel shares that same sentiment. Curiel moved to Sioux Falls from Peru in 2006 and started pursuing his passion for art. He represented South Dakota by creating pieces with landmarks of the state visited by superheroes. He hoped that it would allow kids to dream big.
Through the art, you can inspire people and also connecting with the fantasy, the memories, and trying to build community and also inspire kids to maybe in the future they can see ourselves like us, like another artist.
Sometimes life is difficult, and the outlet provided by art and pop culture makes a huge impact in the lives of youth that stays with them into adulthood. Curiel and Gapster make art, but they're in the business of making connections. Gapster gave away 1,000 copies of his second graphic novel today, and Curiel reminded people that heroes can be anywhere.
A guy yesterday by a drawing when they see the State Theater when the Batman there and say, I remember in 1998 I saw my first Batman movie in that theater with my dad. So it was kind of emotional at that point.
Happy to get as many books into as many kids' hands as possible, and yeah, happy to sign all day as long as it takes.
Those two artists look forward to sharing their artwork at even more shows, and they hope that plenty more youth will do the same. In Sioux Falls, Parker Brown, Dakota News Now.